Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the third session in our Sustainability by Design series, Design Thinking to Reduce Carbon Emissions, hosted by Vlad Finn. For 3 decades, Vlad has led a double life as a serial entrepreneur and an executive in technology, engineering and healthcare. Taking organisations to the next level has been the way Vlad expresses his strategic and creative self. Combined with his passion for performance coaching, allows Vlad to directly make a difference in the world, which is what these sessions are all about. Firstly, we're going to make the acknowledgement. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. House rules, same as usual. Keep your video on at all time, please. If you can rename yourself with first name and company, that allows us to identify you. You will be muted throughout the course of the presentation, with the exception of the breakout rooms. You can ask questions through the moderated chat. You can use the private chat to contact other participants. You can switch between speaker view and gallery view. Just a warning that the conference will be recorded. Again, not the breakout rooms. We won't be launching any polls during this conference, but participation in the breakout rooms is very much appreciated. So please stay focused and engaged. So we're just going through the welcome and introductions. The challenge and breakout one will start at around 10 past. We will then come in to discuss our findings from the first breakout room, with the next steps in breakout 2 starting at about 25 past. Vlad will then run through the remainder of the presentation, design thinking and systems thinking, and finish up with some global examples of impact for discussion, with a close around about 5:30. I'll now hand over to our host for today, Vladimir Finn.
We have action. Great. So, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining. I know we've got quite a turnout and people are still coming in. So I want to just give people an opportunity just to arrive as we kick off. I'm just sort of seeing the people that are coming in. I think that's going to be plenty. Anyway, those that don't get the beginning and so forth, yeah, there's always the recording. So again, thank you everybody for attending. My background, just to quickly give you an understanding of sort of where I'm coming from, particularly with the interest that I have around sustainability. It was a really lovely welcome from Alistair. Thank you so much. And, I've often been called somebody living a double life, in corporate and startup. Over the last couple of years, I've really started to understand more and more around sustainability. And, I had a really great long stint in Oricon, where I started to focus on how do you create real impact, from engineering and technology. I'm a software engineer, working in an organization at the time that was, all the other engineering consultants, as you may know. And, the whole smart cities play, not to mention smart grids, was only just really starting out. It was early days. And we really saw how impact can really happen when you bring technology and engineering together. So I wanted to, talk about the design thinking and how that needs to lead further into systems thinking and implementation as the focus of this session. And the reason why it's a passion of mine is because when you bring the engineering and technology together and you bring in that human-centered approach, that's where communities, companies, organizations, governments, they really start to come together to actually create real impact in the world. So, work with an organization called SDGX. SDGX is a global fund focusing on impact investment. And my particular focus is really on helping organizations access global markets and smart city developments. The focus, from a global perspective, especially around the SDGs, is broad. My particular focus is on really bringing those partnerships together, so SDGX 17, across the range of SDGs, where engagement by government, engagement by corporates, engagement by community groups, when we'll start working together, ecosystems around smart cities and startups and scale-ups. As you start to come together, you start to really see the impact being generated, and impact needs to happen where projects are implemented. So today's going to be a really unique approach, right? So the unique approach that I'd like to take with you is I'd like us to have, as a group, opportunities to really start to think about from our own perspective. We are going to be speaking more about the design thinking methodologies and so forth. But before I get into that area or that detail, what I'd like to do is I'd like to, now that people are really sort of coming on, I'd like to start to break people out into a few groups. And what I'd like us to do is to think about the issues from our human perspective, from the empathy that we have as people, the empathy we have with those around the world that are dealing, with environmental change, global warming, and all sorts of things that happen and that are, related to the carbon emissions. And I'd like us to look at, okay, so reducing carbon emissions, how do we understand the way that people feel? What is it they're thinking about? What are the issues around that? The needs as people, and understanding deeply, what people are feeling, what's going on. So what I'm going to do in a minute, not yet, but just in a minute, we're going to break out in groups, small groups, for only 10 minutes. And what we're going to do is we're going to dive straight in. What's important here, it's not what it's about me, or it's not what someone, it's just important about, governments, technologies, and the like. What's really important is when we talk about human-centered design, human-centered thinking, that sort of a design thinking element, it's very important for us to tap in early into the empathy. So what we're going to do is that we're going to break out into the groups. Someone in the group will just take the lead to collect a list, like do a list, a focus list, of the challenges that you as individuals, that you see people, yourselves, other business leaders, the issues that they face when it comes to reducing carbon emissions. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to approach it from a really personal perspective. Really empathy, come from it from the perspective of empathy, right? So this is an exercise not in getting it right. Absolutely not. This is not an exercise in getting all the right answers. It's an exercise in empathy to really understand. And the reason we're doing this is because as we dive into here, what you will get as we go through today, in the next hour, what you'll get is a deep understanding of the benefits of design thinking and how it can be used to reduce carbon emissions and many, many other, SDG type aligned or, impact aligned impact aligned outcomes that we will achieve. And on the side here, I just wanted to show you, so throughout the presentation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a series of images, and I'm going to point to organizations that are doing incredible things. And, I'm very fortunate to be part of the CIONET community, as you are as well. I'm also really fortunate to be working with SDGX as an organization where there's a fund that invests in businesses of high impact, but I get the opportunity to work in the globalizer business that actually sees projects come to life. And so here I've got an example of the work that Nadim Chokera is doing in an organization in Europe called 2030 Cabinet. Feel free to jump on and have a look. What's really special about Nadim and his work is that they have been working for a very long time already in creating, that design thinking approach aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. And, when we look at this, and I'll show you, and there'll be others as well, but I just want to point out that throughout, you'll see examples that I recommend you jump on, have a look, connect with them. I'll try and bring you as many global examples as I can, including lots from Australia as well. So while I can see you all on the video, can I get a thumbs up that you guys are ready to go, drop into our first breakout session? And I'll see you in 10 minutes. Thumbs up. Brilliant, guys. This is excellent. All right. Alistair, Peter, take it away. So we're all back. Give me a thumbs up. You guys can hear me, just to be sure. Awesome. All right. I think we had 2 breakout rooms. Is that right, Alistair or Peter? Are you guys there? There we go. Still people coming back. 2 breakout rooms. Is that right, Alistair? Yes, 2 breakout rooms. Beautiful. Okay. So the way we're going to run this, fairly quickly. Yeah? So we're going to grab some feedback now, just so everyone shares, and it's fantastic. And I'm going to keep it fairly tight because we're going to move to the next part of this, which is the defining, and I'll share what I want you guys to do in a second. So let's just, is there someone from the first group? Yeah, is it Silika? Are you from the first group?
Jenny was actually really keen to keep the format, but
sorry, I'm talking there, Alistair. That's
it's more about, do we need to duplicate the format? Because what I feel that we have in here already through talking to staff.
Alistair, do you want to unmute Silika?
Yeah.
So we've already got the levels. So if you're a junior test analyst.
Okay, I got it. It's okay.
Sorry, I don't have the power. Not the host.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize it was.
Sorry.
It's Peter. Sorry, I keep looking at you because Peter's in the background. Sorry, mate. Okay, so I'll unmute whoever if you like. Just give me a wave or put your hand up in the thing. So who was taking the notes from the first one? Oh, okay. Go ahead.
I can go first, yeah. So,
yeah.
Look, I think there was a lack of understanding where to start. So Maheen made the comment that there's so many options out there. It's such a big topic that being able to break it down into manageable parts was a bit of a challenge. So there was no lack of desire. There was just a lack of understanding of where to start. And there's not readily accessible guidelines or a guidebook that really educates you and tells you where to start now. And, there was another point made that the information and the internal models that are in place now are, fairly out of date. So there's a lack of easily accessible information that can guide you in order to make the changes that you want to make and to help you understand how to do that and where to go. The other complexity or a level of complexity was introduced when you were working with, say, in partnership with multiple organisations. So Jay made the point that when he was at Toll, they were trying to work in conjunction with Nike. And then often there were other third and fourth parties involved as well. So trying to get an agreement and adherence and spread the load across each of those different parties can be quite difficult because each organisation has their own set of rules. So again, just trying to get that agreement across everybody was a real challenge. Again, no lack of desire to do the right thing, but without a proper framework that everybody agrees to and is able to follow, it can take time, and often you lose time as you go ahead. So they were the main kind of things that came up. Lisa had just started to talk about, starting to use digital and technology solutions and engineering to become more sustainable, often being driven by, some of the younger staff there that had probably more of an awareness and more of a desire to do that. And I know just my own kind of experience with Transurban, that using digital twins allowed them to monitor, for example, the fans in some of the tunnels. They would be able to predict when those were likely to break or wear down, and you could then go out and change those specific components rather than having to do a regular replacement of all of the fans, which, you know, incredibly wasteful, just from a materials perspective, never mind the kind of energy consumption. So definitely an awareness and a need, but difficulty in knowing where to start and how to do it and getting buy-in across multiple stakeholders.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, man. That's a fantastic list. And actually, you know, it's going to be very complementary to the conversation we had in group one. Let me just, Michelle, unmute you. If I can just work out how to do that. Unmute. Does that work for you, Michelle?
Yep.
Beautiful. Gotta love it when it comes together. Go ahead.
Thank you. Now, our group, similarly with the first group, talked about how overwhelming it can be with the vaster range of things. And as a kind of single person or a single company, trying to figure out what you can make a difference with. So where to start, you know, where to really get going with any of this, how to decide what to focus on, and really looking at, even from an infrastructure point of view, the big challenges for both job and home. And really, Alistair talked about frameworks. Our group talked about kind of stepping stones, understanding what those stepping stones are to be able to get to the ultimate goal, and knowing how to articulate that, what a single person can do. There was a bit about conflicting priorities. We covered that on a couple of different areas. You know, things like if you have to fly for your job and yet you kind of know that flying is not the right thing to do, so you look for alternatives, but also wanting to fly to be with family, and how do you have that kind of balance between being with family and not wanting to contribute from a carbon point of view. And equally with knowing that you should take public transport, but then, you know, you've got to pick your kids up on time. So there was all of that anxiety around making those choices. Interesting from a education with children point of view, there were 2 points of view here. There was one about, you know, how do you educate your kids about, you know, what's coming with climate change and how to address it. But equally, there was a feeling that the kids are actually better educated than we are already. And they're coming home and going, hey, Dad, what the hell are you doing with that plastic water bottle? So there's working around all of that. And generally a feeling of uncertainty, you know, where to start, how fast to go, how are we going to get to kind of 2050 targets.
Excellent. Oh, fantastic. That's great. And look, and I just hope everyone just had a sense of what that's like and sort of was capturing that, because that's really nicely balanced between the two groups. And we're going to take the, you know, the design thinking piece to that next stage, right? So let me just quickly share my screen one more time. Just give me 1 minute. That will start. All right. Fantastic. So the next step what we want to do here is we want to define what we're talking about. And so in that journey, we really want to reframe the problem. You know, we spent this time, it was very quick, right? And we really got, I think, very deep, very quickly, and people were extremely open and, you know, authentic about feel and what is happening, you know, for them and in their work environment and the world they live in, especially when it comes to family and work and those, you know, that push-pull. So what we want to do here is that as a group, again, super fast, we want to create the problem statement, you know, in a human-centered way, right? So we want to be able to say, you know, what is the issue that you know, that is faced with reducing carbon emissions, you know, but we want to say it in a way that is really, that can touch people. You know, when you talk to people, you know, we got on this call, this is fantastic CIONET, you know, reducing carbon emissions conference, and what we discovered that the real problem is this, and people just go, yeah, I get it. I really, really get it. And so this is, so you can see here on the slide, the real problem with reducing carbon emissions is, it's a really nice way. I mean, you can put it in any way you like. And it doesn't have to be one. What I'd like to see is that, you know, in 10 minutes, give a few, statements a go. You've got Alistair, you've got Michelle writing it down. Give it a bit of a go where it starts off. You know what the real problem with reducing carbon emissions is, and I just want you to go really kind of deep and focused. While we do the first part, which is very much about, the empathy piece, where we sit in the space and understand what people are feeling, now we want to say it in a way that resonates with people, knowing what people are feeling. Hopefully that makes sense for everyone. What we're going to do is we're going to break out again. The same thing, like you take, put a list together and someone comes back. What I've got here, which is interesting, is an example of this process, and you'll see it here, is, I've done some amazing work with the team, Sam Hurley and Phil Orr, and I'm sure a number of you probably met them. We attended a hackathon, at Federation Square here in Melbourne, and they were looking exactly at what is the usability of this space? What can be done? How can people use the space to better, themselves, the community, the businesses that are there? And the process that we ran through there, that Phil and Sam took us through, was exactly like that. And in that photo, I don't know if you can see, there's Trent Di Costello, who's right there in the middle from Foria. I mean, that was the technological piece of it. But the process that you go through when you do the design thinking, it has to be a long part of it in that human element. You've got to really get to the heart of it. You've got to spend the time there. You've got to really understand what's going on. And then you can get into the solutioning. So that's why we're spending the time on these two areas first as the key breakouts. All right. So shall we jump off and break off into the breakout rooms?
I was just going to say there's a saying that goes around that somebody that plants a tree now, knowing that they're not going to benefit from it, and it's almost like your grandkids will get to sit in the shade of that tree. Can't remember the exact saying, but I think it kind of sums that up really clearly. Knowing that what you do now will have an impact without necessarily being around to see that come to life. So you need to have that kind of belief in that positivity coming through.
That's awesome, Alistair. I think you touched on something that is really, that came out in our conversation as well. So, I've got something that I've written down that I'm expecting that my very good friend Lisa Tracy would have put down on the table there. So I'm waiting. No pressure, Lisa, but I'm expecting one particular response. Hey, Alistair, do you want to take it away? What, one statement or multiple statements, it's not a problem. We started with many, and Michelle summed it up into, it's however you like to do it. It's,
so
free to go.
I think what we've come back to is really, where do you start? The lack of understanding of or appreciation of the impact that your individual contribution really has. So the feedback loop is so long and it's quite intangible. So if you go, and we spoke about organisations who would commit to planting a tree or a number of trees for every, sort of achievement that they have, do you actually see that, or is it just an image of something a far off field somewhere or in a different country? It's quite intangible for people to really to be able to appreciate what's happening. And you can maybe save a bit of money by switching off your lights or not using your aircon, but really the savings are fairly negligible. So that lack of tangible benefit and the length of the feedback loop it doesn't disincentivize, but it doesn't maybe give you enough encouragement because it takes such a long time to see the benefit, which is where I was going with the analogy with the person that plants the tree doesn't necessarily benefit from it. But something that Lisa brought up, which may or may not be what you were alluding to, sort of gamifying that. So being able to see in maybe a kind of virtual sense the benefit to what you do and how that's impacting elsewhere. Because as individuals, we maybe can't travel to a Pacific island to see that the water has stopped rising, or there are more turtles laying eggs now and they're not becoming female because the temperatures are rising, which is something I learned from Michelle's first session. So maybe being able to kind of bring the results of our good behaviour into our home and being able to kind of see that would benefit, but then who takes responsibility for that?
Yeah, that's awesome. You know, like that for me, that one of the things it brings up was that, you know, when David Attenborough, not the latest one, but the previous one where he did the, you know, Our Planet, you know, I was with the Fourier team at that time, you know, creating the virtual and augmented experience of that Netflix thing. And it was incredible, you know, like there was this piece around people just experiencing not the destruction. They saw the destruction in a real sense of all around them. It was in the Singapore, you know, Arts Gallery in Singapore. People were there experiencing it, but the beautiful part was the rewilding experience. In fact, actually right now, if you have, Facebook Oculus, you know, you can have that experience in the home. So if you have it, get the rewild experience. It's mind-blowing. That's what the team at Ford have done with Netflix and Facebook. But like this experience of good behavior actually has a positive impact. Hey, it's incredible. So I really understand it. And even we look at the new David Attenborough piece around the statement, he's not talking about all the destruction. It's his statement that things can improve. It can improve. And I think you're absolutely right. So that's a really great point. So, okay, so we've got those two. Beautiful. That's great feedback, guys. Really good, you know, problem statement. Michelle, did you want to jump in? Do I need to unmute Michelle? Sorry. Michelle.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Similar to the first group, so we kind of worked around it a bit and gradually drilled it down and down. We covered things like, you know, yes, it's an overwhelming problem, that there are still confusing messages, that we don't know what success looks like. So then we kind of brought in the measurement angle of it, that there's no clear roadmap, there's no clear coordination between government, the public and businesses to achieve what needs to be achieved. And really, what we talked about was there being a disconnect between the current cost of action versus the future benefit, which Alistair's touched on as well. But that came back to, if you're going to have kind of a one-word or few-word definition of the problem, it's about that we're really not measuring the damage that we're doing now in a way that gives us a clear cost-benefit immediate analysis. And that's really, that sense of urgency is not there due to that that distortion of how we're measuring what's happening today versus what we could be doing to stop damage in the future.
That's excellent, like really excellent. And I know as part of that, so I'm not saying it's excellent because I was there, like together what we've got, you know, is the, you know, we're really coming together with very clear problem statements. And so what I want to do with you guys now is that when, you know, I was saying to you, you know, when we did the hackathon, you know, with the marketing entourage team in, you know, in Fed Square, or the work that, you know, we do, you know, overseas with Nadim and others, it's a long process. You don't do, you know, design thinking workshop just, you know, in an hour and get from end to end, right? I know, Megan, you've done this, and then Megan's smiling because it's one of those things that takes time. You need to ideate, you need to create. But what I'd like to do is I want us to go through the process to quickly see how impact is possible, even if we spend most of the time in the design and the thinking and getting into the human component. And this part here is actually the easy part. This is the easy bit. So I'd like to just open it up to anyone. So there's a little button that you can put when you go to on your screen. I think it's more. If you put up your hand, I'll unmute you because then I'll see that I want to talk, right? Because we're in a big group at the moment, yeah? What I'd like to do is this. The next part of the process of design thinking, we've got to ideate. Like, so what are all the ideas? Okay, so we've done the statement. Let's pick a good statement. How do we know that we've arrived? Yeah, the measurement. Or how do we gamify, you know, to create the positive good behavior? Or, you know, how do we build that lack of, you know, the individual understanding to make the benefits more tangible, you know, to get that feedback loop, which is a long feedback loop, more prevalent. Yeah. So what I'd like to do is just open it up. If I may even, I wonder if I can just unmute everybody. I'm going to unmute everyone. Okay, this is crazy. We never do this normally, but we're going to do it. So just, let's see how we go. Let's try it out. I'm going to unmute all. Oh, and Peter's going to hate me for this. If you'd like, comment on, did it ask all to unmute? Here we go. Here we go. Would you like to comment on what could be an idea? Like what could be a way of measuring? What could be a way of gamifying? What could be a way to create that understanding? Let's just jump in and see. And if it's too messy, I'll mute and then we'll do our hands up. So let's just do some ideation so you can see how quick the process is. Go ahead.
Or measurement, I would say parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. If we sort of set a target of about 180 to 200, and everything. If you're just talking carbon emissions, you'd hit that.
So you're talking about measurement. Are you thinking about an app, a tool, a platform? Sorry, I've got it. I can see that. Oh, thank you. Cheers. I'm going to unmute you and we'll do that differently. 1 second. Michael, you are unmuted. Go for it when you're ready.
Thanks, mate.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just measurements of the atmosphere, just what we've already got, and setting government policies to get that driving.
Okay, got it. Fantastic. Megan, yes, I see your hand coming up. Thank you for waving. I can't see. Okay, give it a go. Thanks. Megan?
I love that idea of the measurement, and I was just thinking about, if we're doing brainstorming, how much all Victorians, and I'm not sure where you're all from, I'm from Melbourne, have been watching the COVID numbers crazily, to such an extent that we all know what a double donut, triple donut day is. So if we could create those sorts of measurements, something that people want to see every day and actually get interested in, that would be a big win.
I love it. Yeah. And there's definitely some sort of gamification there, isn't there? So for sure. I'm
already unmuted. It's okay, Glad. I'm just, as playing devil's advocate in this, I still think there's a huge portion of the public that we haven't convinced that actually reducing carbons is a good thing. So being able to measure that is great, but we've also got to, how do we get that connection between measuring and the impact it's going to have on my daily life? You know, what's in it for me as Joe Blow and the public to see that number coming down? With COVID, it's obvious, you know, I'm not going to get sick. How do we get that out there?
And the power of this brainstorming session too is that no idea is a bad idea. So if you were to say, okay, what's another way of measuring? What could we do? Is it like a counter, a global counter? What might be something that comes to mind, Michelle? Is there something that pops into mind? Like, how could we do it? You know, what might be a solution for that? Do you have anything to throw on the table?
Tricky.
Yeah, tricky. Yeah. So no, it's okay. Anybody else? No, else?
Oh no, Therese, please, ladies first.
No, I was just thinking, going back to the COVID discussion and the donuts, and I know in the early days we were looking at the world odometer, and we were comparing ourselves to other countries. And I know how, you know, we're also competitive, maybe, you know, just sort of following on from the measurement and the gamifying, you know, potentially comparing countries as well, and how we track against, you know, some other countries and their results, and that might also be a bit of a motivator, I guess, to reduce those emissions.
Yeah, awesome, exactly. Go. I think Lisa was next actually, so, and then Zach and Alistair. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sorry. We've talked a little bit in our group about there's no clear roadmap between community, government and business. Even though, look, I do think there are disparate roadmaps, definitely. Everyone's trying. But I think a platform that sort of aggregates everything that you can, you know, monopoly, is that a good thing? I don't know, but a centralized platform that aggregates everything, so you can see, you know, if I want to hook in as an activist, these are the areas where I can. If I want to be, you know, at the state or federal level, understanding what's happening and how I can hook in, you know, where can I go, but in a way that's easy to understand, not that you're having to troll through, you know, a government site to disparate, you know, benefits and programs and grants. You know, it's all sort of really beautifully laid out, and also in there could potentially host that gamification piece as well, so you can at a glance see how each city is doing in comparison to another in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, and who's faring well, and how that's being contributed to by the communities, by business, through, you know, the built environment, whatever it might be, and it all feeds in data. And it's the data piece that's really challenging, because it's putting that data.
Can I put it to the group, because I know we're going to, no, thanks so much, and I know there are a couple of questions and we're going to move on shortly, but those that want to speak still throw in. Can I just ask you, what about, you know, that challenge of the lack of an individual understanding and the tangible benefits, you know, that length of that feedback loop? What about some ideas of how to tackle that? Has anyone got something that you want to throw down? I think Zach, you were going to say something next as well. Did you want to try that?
Well, I was thinking about this measuring, and I was thinking back to the beginning of the year and the bushfires, and I think we are already doing a good job in measuring. There are measuring stations out there. We have apps on our phones telling us about air quality, and they're measuring to a degree exactly what Michael was mentioning. I think the missing link is to incentivize behavior connected to these measurements. We looked at the COVID numbers, yes, but they were only important to us because there were regulations in place that said, okay, if the numbers are below a certain threshold, you are allowed to do certain other things. So there are bonuses, there are incentives. Whereas with the air quality, there is no incentive. So I think we need to think a little bigger. We need to get everyone on the same page in order to inspire action. The measuring is the first step. I fully agree, but I think we achieved that already.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. I appreciate it. And, you know, it's worth me just putting in that, you know, I'm very fortunate, you know, to be working with a team like the SDGX team, where we have access to so many people that are, you know, looking at, you know, carbon emissions, you know, price for carbon, you know, trading, and finding that kind of measurement, and, you know, how do farmers, you know, utilize their land to capture those emissions and, you know, trade. So there's some really incredible solutions that are out there. I agree with you for sure. And so, you know, giving people the opportunity to see the longer term benefits, but also benefit now from that, maybe that's part of that solution potentially as well. So yeah, that's fantastic. Alistair, go ahead.
Oh, look, a lot of that's been covered, but I think coming back to this again of gamification idea. So even if there was an app that you could plug in to your lifestyle, so you know, what kind of car do you drive? What is your power and gas consumption? Where are you going on holiday? How far do you go? What do you buy? And it would be hard to do, and you know, it would need to be obviously kind of secure, that would almost kind of spit out a green score. And it would give you the option, say, well, if you change your car to an electric vehicle, you know, you're going to reduce your kind of footprint by X, or some sort of way of making it very clear to people what their impact is. And if you were then to be able to kind of feed in your sort of, you know, kind of set of preferences around that. So if I drive, for example, now a Volvo petrol car and I go and buy a Tesla next week, do I save 10 turtles or do I grow 15 trees? You know, something, and it's, you're really trying to gamify it and trying to put it on a level that people will individually relate to. And maybe that, in some cases, will just be a monetary gain. Or if you do this, chances are the cost of something that you consume will go down. You know, if you go solar, if everybody goes solar, the price of electricity will come down. So I think you need to take an approach that's very personalised, as is everything these days. Personalisation, data, get to know each individual, gamify it, make it a bit more tangible.
Yes,
I think that would work for some people.
It's cool. And you've got to keep in mind, so before Ursula jump on, so Lisa Tracy just shared something worthwhile in the chat. Just grab that link and have a look. But what's cool about this process, right? When we are in this design thinking piece, it's about us as people. It's about the people that, you know, getting that human-centered approach. It's from the ground up, right? And so the more creative you can be, the more that there's the next stage you can test, right? So just imagine you take that to the next level. What Alice is talking about is like, what if, you know, everyone, you know, at some point is wearing their AR glasses, they're walking around, and, you know, there I see Michael walking down the street, and above him, he's got his green score, you know, and I look at it there and it's, oh, there's Lisa, and there's Lisa Tobin. Oh, hey, I'm Megan. Yeah, why are you in the red? So, you know, imagine, you know, you can take it so far. It's kind of a dystopia, but, you know, at the flip side, what if in our social networks, you know, at the moment, we go, hey, check out all the food I'm eating. What about check out how green I am? You know, what if we flipped it on its head in that model? You know, this is the time, this is the stage of the design thinking where you can be crazy in your ideas because there's no wrong ideas. And you build it up, And then you sort of go, okay, what can we test? So Ursula, I'll do the last question and then we're going to move on. Yeah, so go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, look, I was going to say, I think, you know, our water bills, we come through and we get on the water bill, basically how you rate to someone else's family, right? So it says, you know, you're a family of 3, you've got a swimming pool, and this is where your usage is. And we do measure that, right, in terms of, is that reasonable? But I think also, you know, to the point of gamification, right? I've got a Fitbit, friends connected to that, you know, voluntarily. You know, we race, we improve our steps for virtual badges, right? And to Alistair's point about, you know, little virtual turtles, you know, I think there is the ability to incentivize, whether that's, you know, insurance premiums coming down or whatever else, but also, you know, people will actually, you know, they're motivated by quite small rewards, and it shouldn't be that difficult, right, to pull things in and be able to build that, because I think the sources are all out there. They're just pretty disparate at the moment. I guess the other side that I was thinking as well with the COVID example that Zach shared, right, is, you know, if we were measuring, say, air quality, right, the COVID equivalent would be, we're going to cut the city off to cars if the air quality, right, if the R number gets up to, you know, a certain amount, then you can only take in, you know, your Teslas and your Priuses and whatever, your electric cars, right? And I think that from a COVID perspective has really changed the landscape, right? Because I think up until now we have individual rights and freedoms to do whatever, and COVID has really turned it on its head, right? I mean, Alan Joyce is now saying we won't let you on a Qantas flight unless you vaccinate. That's a huge, huge change, and so I think some of that could also be leveraged, right? The Chinese do it quite frequently, actually, in terms of air quality and closing parts off, and the Indian government have done it for Commonwealth Games and things. So it is possible, but it is a real change in terms of how we view personal freedoms versus our responsibilities to others. But maybe COVID has changed that.
Yeah, could you imagine, Ursula, that if we had this conversation, you know, pre-COVID, and you said that, like, you probably would it would probably never even cross your mind to even say, see how, like, it's incredible how much, you know, the not just the COVID impact of, you know, being locked down, but the impact on the environment, what this huge change has been, and go, that's really interesting, you know, so it's really cool. Like, you know, the car's not allowed in when the air quality gets a certain way. People will probably go, like, to be honest, I hear that, I'm like, that's actually interesting. You know, that's, I reckon you could test.
And then you would have to spray transport and other things, right? But I think that is the world that we are now in, right? So you can't go to work, so we're going to, you know, scale broadband or online shopping or whatever else. I think it's fascinating how quickly that's changed.
Yeah, really
just to add to this, these things are actually already happening for many years, for instance, in Germany, that they close off cities if the air quality is low, or that they don't allow cars to go above a certain speed. It just was never correlated to the environment to impact in terms of climate emergency. I think it's just a small step, but it's a big one with a big impact.
Yeah, and this is what we can do, like, you know, in the organizations where we work, you know, we can look at, okay, what is it that is the issue for us where we work, or what is the issue that we're facing? What can we tweak, you know, in all of those, because we, you know, we started off, we talked about, you know, there's how do we feel that we can impact in the big picture in the things that we do, and maybe we can, you know, that's these sort of, you know, ideas that we're testing. Go, well, can I test this? And Michelle will be the last one, and then we'll just move on. There's a few more things to cover off, so go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, I was loving the way we were going with the gamification stuff, and wondering whether we throw business into the equation as well, with loyalty points for discounts on goods. So not only can I feel good because I've beaten my neighbour, but I've got, you know, a 5% discount on something at my local supermarket.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see, you know, we're seeing buildings being built, like green buildings. You know, it's been a while for, like, in that space, green buildings are coming up, but also material that's being used in the buildings. And what about the next level of actual constant measurement to a point where you go, hold on, we're outputting too much. You know, as a community, if we have this much CO2 output, well, we've got to cut air conditioning, or you have to stay home because, you know, we're too much. I wonder, like, kind of taking that idea that we're talking through, like what Ursula was talking about with flights and so forth, like, or cars coming in. What if we start from an organizational perspective, go, actually, we're using too much power, you know, we're impacting too much. Maybe there's something there where we can impact from an internal perspective. You know, I think that's where the business side of things comes from, you know, from an organizational perspective. I'm just going to share my screen, guys. Just give me 1 second, and we're just going to keep on trucking. Let's play that. Hopefully you guys can see that. So, and this is the work that we did. You know, this is you know, Sam and Phil when they did this. You know, for the hackathon at Fed Square. It was absolutely fantastic. So, I'm just going to give you the broader picture. And this is just such a simplistic model. I mean, anyone who's done any kind of design thinking workshops, you know, the work we do with Nadim out of Europe and Germany, you know, it's significantly deeper. We spend hours, sometimes a day. We'll work through. My time back with Capgemini, I remember we had a 3-day workshop that, you know, people flew in all over the world to run these. So we're just trying to give you a sense. That's kind of what I was really hoping to do, is a sense of what the process is, but to feel it. Do you know what I mean? Like, how do you, just because if you feel it, you go, you know, this is actually not so difficult. Like, we could try some of these things, and people are doing it all over the world in different organizations. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you through just some examples of all companies that, you know, that we work with, that we worked with through the SDGX team and so forth. And, you know, I'll show you the city of Newcastle that, you know, I've spoken to and the work that they've done. It's online. I'll show you what they're doing in this space and how it's impacting. But I just wanted to finish this off. So we created the ideas, lots of ideas, just like what we've generated. Prototyping is super important. You've got to trial things out. And we're not necessarily talking about spending large amounts of money. I was just on a call this morning with, you know, somebody that is trialing, you know, some bleeding edge solutions, you know, in that, you know, in the charity space. Yeah. And the question there is, how do we, you know, how do we get to the real problem? You know, it's not just about the money that comes to the charities, but how do you deal with the other issues? And so, very important to not get stuck in the technology solution of things, but actually dealing with that human-centered, like that bottom-up, you know, really from the human condition, what's really going on, and testing that. And you can do that in such cheap ways. And then as you test your prototype and it's circular, I want to leave you when we talk about the design thinking is that it's not linear. We've done it in a linear way, but you can jump in at any point because, you know, if I look at the organizations I've worked with and, you know, just the experiences I've had, many times you'll go into a workshop like this and people have already done all the thinking. They've got it there. They just need to start ideating, or they need to start identifying, what should I prototype? Like, what am I going to test? And so you can start at any point, test it, you know, measure it, come back, ideate more. It's not linear, it's circular. And you can run things in parallel. Yeah? Okay, this is something I got off the web. So Layla is, you know, she works at Disrupt Design. I've never worked with her, but I found this image and I love this image. I use it all the time whenever I talk about systems thinking. And, you know, this was, you can see the link there. It's, you know, disruptdesign.co. I don't know her, but my God, this is such an awesome image from them. When you look at, you know, systems thinking, and the reason I put this here is that it's great to do the design, but we, as we are in the, you know, technology space, we're in supply chain, we're in manufacturing, you know, we're in retail, online, like we do so many things, right? Like the community of CIONET is huge globally, and we sit in many, many different areas, many different businesses and the like. We need to think not just about the testing our ideas, we need to also identify what are the systems. And here is a great capture of this, you know, so as opposed to disconnected ideas, we've got lots of ideas to test, we start to bring them together. And we saw some of this interconnectedness when we're coming together with some of our statements, you know, like how do we measure that, you know, that we've arrived? You know, how do we gamify good behavior? There's all of this stuff that's happening. Okay, let's bring it together. Let's have it all to be connected so that we can identify and implement, you know. You know, obviously it's circular, we test, it's not linear. Things have to start and end. You think about the entire system. You know, instead of silos, we think about things emerging. We talk about wholes instead of parts. And, you know, we start to synthesize. When you talk about systems thinking, we take it to the next to the next level, we're not just analysing the individual ideas. We're saying, okay, let's look at the whole, and even more so, let's look at the relationships. Let's look at the technology stack. Let's look at the environmental conditions. Let's look at the location. Let's look at the people. How does that work? What are the influences? And systems thinking, when you take it to the next level, takes your design thinking work to a whole new level. So I'm going to give you an example of what the City of Newcastle is doing. This is straight from online. You can jump on and have a look. The thing that is brilliant, that is absolutely brilliant and is a standout, is that the City of Newcastle here in Australia, in New South Wales, is probably one of the few, if maybe potentially the only, I don't want to be, because I haven't seen everything, but one of the very few that has gone with, what is it that we want to do as a city? Most people in the smart city space have products provided to them. They buy products, they buy this equipment, they buy this monitoring, they buy, this smart rubbish bins, they buy, these sensors and so forth. Whereas the City of Newcastle took a different approach. They created this living lab. That's somebody talking in the background. So, sorry, Peter, if you could just mute them, that would be great. Thanks, mate. So in Newcastle, they've created. Sorry, Peter, are you able to just mute them? Whoever's talking, it's just getting a lot of feedback. Thanks, mate. So the Living Lab is set up to actually do the design thinking and engage and prototype with community and business partners. So instead of just acquiring solutions and tech, they're actually going, how do we create a system? How do we create an infrastructure that allows people from all over the world to come to the city, companies from anywhere, and test at a level that is city scale? That is incredible. Just think about the work that they've done to go from, okay, we're a city, we want to impact positively, we want to have impact, but hold on, let's pause for a minute. Let's do the thinking. What is important? And what they did was they went through the process of going, actually, if we create an infrastructure, then that allows us to scale impact. So when any company or any organization in the world or partners who want to test things out, they can come to the City of Newcastle and actually test those ideas, implement it. The community can say, we're going to try this out. You can see and measure. And that is absolutely unique, incredible from that city scale. From the SDGX perspective, we work in Thailand, Singapore, we're also working, in Europe, and we're seeing a shift in actually, just like what we're talking about, how do we measure and how do we enable people to use the infrastructure to get scale? So it's really exciting piece. I'm just going to show you a few more things and then I'll open it up for some comments, okay, guys? In Australia, one of the companies that that we've been working with is absolutely incredible, right? So talk about taking design thinking to the next level, yeah? So the smoked egg company, Julie Koss and her team, they're farmers here in Victoria. They produce eggs, free range eggs of very high quality. They started this process of, we want to create this smoke flavor. We want to do eggs that are, really unique. And so as they went through, they discovered through that process, you can see, that actually they can increase the shelf life without degradation of the quality of the egg. And actually, as they went through, they're going, actually, is it possible for us to actually deal with, global food security? I mean, if the eggs can last non-refrigerated without any degradation inside because the smoke has this, they've got a patented process. So they've gone to the level of actually patenting a process that is unique anywhere in the world, here from Victoria, but going through this process of identifying what is the real problem? Who really wants this? Hold on, we've smoked it, but can we create an egg that's actually safe? And so suddenly, as they see issues happen with, for example, there's a chicken flu outbreak in Australia. Who would guess? You don't know these things, So sometimes, there's this up and down situation where there can be risk of shortages, but there are shortages of eggs around the world that can happen. But what's interesting is that by going through this process of going, hey, we've discovered something, let's work this through. And as they've done the testing and the research, they started to move to, okay, now that we can do this, how do we make this happen around the world? So there's suddenly, okay, chicken farmers around the world, how do we make it technologically viable for them? And how do we make sure that we inform the world? Like, what are the processes? What are the systems of letting people know that this is, you know, safe, it's unique, and actually this is extremely beneficial? So you can see how the design process leads through, like, to implement from the design thinking, you've got to implement the systems. You've got to work through, okay, how do we bring it to the world? I'll go through a few examples and I'll probably stop because I want to make sure there's time for you guys to talk about it. In the same way, you know, electric vehicles, it's, you know, oh my God, it's tiny percentage, it's less than 1% of Australian vehicles are electric vehicles, and that will grow. But you can see that globally, in the US as well, car manufacturers, you know, they're saying they're going to be, you know, electric only, and everyone's got a different time frame, but it's coming. But in order to deal with, you know, the range anxiety of people, when you have a platform like, so we work with GoToYou, they are actually out of the UK and Ukraine, so between, and they're in Eastern Europe and other locations as well. And what they've got is, like, they did this process of going, you know, how we got these electric vehicles, how do we actually identify what the issues are to get more electric vehicles out there? How do we reduce carbon emissions by supporting the electric vehicle global market? And so they identified in that process that range anxiety was just huge. And in Australia, that is a major issue. It is, you know, the distances. And, you know, when you're wasting time standing there charging, you know, and sometimes you rock up and you don't even know if you'll get to a charger because it's not visible. And in order to solve these issues, to make sure that people could book a time, have fast charging stations, know where things are, and integrate services that are broader, they needed to, one, go right across all the different charging stations, different charging technologies to implement the integrations. And they needed to look at the user experience. So as a user, when I go to a charging station, if I need to wait 10 minutes, what can I do there? Can I book ahead? Can I stay there? Can I get a massage? You know what I mean? Like, I'm driving 5-6 hours. Can I get a massage? You know, it's not just quickly getting some food. It can be other services that are available at certain locations. And how do you bring that into a usable model? And systems are critical to make the user experience really, really schmick, yeah? Video is another one straight out of Israel. You know, they saw that there was a problem in the solar array space. You know, people create solar farms, and, you know, one panel, for example, can impact the efficiency of an entire stream. And so they started this deep research in how do you actually lift the entire effectiveness to increase the return on the investment, because that's what people wanted. They wanted to implement mega solar farms, and they do, you know, on an industrial scale, but they had so much loss. So if you could imagine, could you increase the output of your array by 20% or 5%? Or, so, you know, the return on investment needed to be measurable. And that's the work that they did. So when they looked at the different voltages, the different equipment, you know, all the different environments, they got, these are the things that we must integrate with, that we must tune for, and particularly around the technology and the transformers and all the work that happens from end to end on that solar, you know, arrays and the solar streams. They developed a product that actually deals with that. So you see how even when you're an organization and you've got, you know, huge resources and you've got maybe a market that's very set, you can bring in that design thinking and take it all the way through to, okay, what are the systems? Once you've tested the idea and you know it's something real, you take it to the next level. What systems do we need to integrate with? What systems do we have to implement? You can take it right through so that no matter what size organization you are, that design thinking through to systems thinking is really critical, yeah? And, you know, I'll pop this one in here just because I love this as an example. You know, Polyloop, these guys are out of Europe, you know, they've got a bacteria that eats plastic. So that's something that's been around for a while. People have been testing these ideas, and it doesn't eat all plastic. Certain plastics it does. But can you see how when you're faced with a problem, like, for example, we're working on a project, you know, with landfill in Asia at the moment, in Thailand actually, and they've got a landfill, they've got a significant amount of plastic. They don't know how to get it out. They can't get it out. So when you start with, okay, what is the problem? So, take that design thinking approach right from the start. Like, well, we've got a lot of plastics, can we sort things better? Can we recycle? Well, what about the stuff that gets through? Well, can we have it so that it degrades, but without, leaching lots and lots of, more plastic into the water stream and so forth, or into the soil. And so as you go through that design thinking approach, then you go, okay, so what systems do we have to deal with? And how do we measure? How do we capture? How do we implement? How do we create the safety? So you see how, even though we're speaking about design thinking, it's super critical to take it to the next level with the systems that we need to integrate with, the systems that have to be in place, to make things actually come to life. Yeah. I'm just going to pause the stop sharing because I'd love to hear your opinions. I know I sort of went through quite a lot just there. So open it up to those put up their hand. I'd love to hear your thoughts, particularly around in the space that you're in the organizations you're working with. How do you see, that journey being able to play out through that design thinking into systems where you can actually make an impact, particularly around, we're talking about carbon emissions here. So pop your hand up and I'll grab you. Yep. Anybody? Teresa, you're off mute. Maybe you want to jump in? No? I thought he was off mute. Just give me 1 second. Yes, you're right. There you go. Sorry, guys.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yep, that's perfect.
Yeah. I was, just sort of the last point that you made, it's really, you've got to start with what is the problem. And I think that's, when I look at my own role, sort of carbon emissions aside for 1 minute, but if I look at my own role, that's generally the question that I'll start with as well. What is the problem? What are we trying to achieve? And then we don't talk about the technology first, and then we introduce the technology into the discussion. So I thought that was interesting that, that you sort of mentioned that. I wrote it down actually, because often I'll have people say to me, well, just tell us what the technology will do. But you've got to take it right back and try to establish what it is exactly that, that's the issue, that's the problem. And I guess, you can apply that then to the whole carbon emissions conversation as well.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And I know Lisa Tracy will laugh because, I always say that as running the globalizer piece for CGX, we don't actually sell anything. We have nothing to sell. What we want to know is what is it that you want to do? Like, there's nothing to sell, but what is it that you want to create?
Yeah.
So what is it? And then, let's co-create that. That's fantastic. So I really get it. Guys, go ahead. Next hand up. Michelle, did you have a comment as well? Yeah. Okay, so we've got Megan. What are your thoughts? Are you able to unmute? Or do I have to unmute?
No, I'm here. I'm here.
Oh, okay. No,
thank you. I got unmuted, which is awesome. Look, I'm a huge fan of design thinking. In my last organisation, my previous organisation, we did a lot of work using design thinking with electrical engineers. So they certainly weren't people used to it. So I think it's a fantastic way to get people engaged in a problem and give them easy tools to start working through what the ideas might be and how they might work. So I think it's a great way to engage people into problem solving, and I agree on the comment as well around not jumping to the solution first, which we all love doing, but going through the design thinking process certainly stops that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thanks, Megan. Alistair, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm obviously, I don't work in technology per se now, but I did start out my career in that, in technology, and we always tended to do the systems thinking first. It wasn't necessarily called that 20 odd years ago. But I think that can often almost put kind of mental constraints on people, because you're trying to come up with a solution for something that already has a solution, if that makes sense. Whereas, you know, the kind of design thinking concept, which I now understand much better, thank you, it's almost, you know, you're free to come up with the wackiest idea, and then you'll get that idea to work. So for the plastics example, lots of plastics in landfill. Who would have come up with the idea that we will develop a bacteria that will eat that plastic?
Yeah, and turn it into, you know, poop, right?
Exactly. Hopefully that bacteria doesn't get hungry and decide it wants to start eating other things and starts to mutate. But I mean, that type of thinking where people are just genuinely free to come up with whatever solution, and getting people involved and thinking that are not maybe in that type of role previously, they're probably more likely to genuinely think outside of the traditional box. So great approach.
Engineers and scientists absolutely love it. They do. Like, you know, I'm similar, you know, working with engineers, scientists. You know, we had this great sessions with you know, ANSTO, the nuclear agency, when we were doing, like, when you do the design thinking, people just go, wow, I'm free to be crazy. Okay, or what about this? You know, it's really cool, like, in that way. Ursula, and then I think it was Civica. Yeah, go ahead, Ursula.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that, you know, the battery charging case study, I guess spoke to me in terms of the power of design thinking and turning, you know, I guess differentiating your product through the service side. So the problem is one around people being anxious around the ability to charge, but then you layer on the customer service and convenience of being able to book in your time slot, you know, maybe get a massage and those sorts of things. And you can see that's the way that, you know, the companies that are really growing at the moment and differentiating their product is because they're moving away from that pure product offering, right, to offering the service and the customer experience. So I thought that was, that's something I'll take away for this. So thank you.
Thanks. It's transformational. I mean, I try to put in examples that I see are just, you know, when you look at it and you go, okay, that's kind of, it seems logical, but just because they've done that design approach, they've done the human piece, you know, they've said, what is the real issue? You know, that question that we had, what is the real problem? When you ask that question, it transforms something, you know, and people engage with companies and individuals because they've approached from, well, I'm not selling you anything. Tell me, like, let's look at the real problem, you know? And I think it's really...
being able to step outside of what your core offering is, to say, okay, well, to solve it and to drive business that way, we need to solve these things as well. Very interesting.
Thanks, Ursula. I know we're about to finish up, so I'm sorry we're going over time. Civica, last one, and then I'll hand it back over to Alistair to wrap up. Go ahead,
I was just going to say, we as an organisation actually ran a series of training workshops last year around design thinking. And since then, we have seen a change wherein we've set up an innovation lab called North Star, where people are now coming up with ideas which we otherwise would not have thought about. And we've seen some of them being turned into real products that we've been able to sell as well. So I certainly agree that it does give it the wings.
It really does. I know that I wish we'd had, you know, the city of Newcastle here, but it's, you know, I didn't have quite enough time to get them on board. But every time I've spoken with them and others, when you approach it in that way, you know, creating that kind of lab, you really got to start from the human aspect first. So, okay. Thank you so much, everybody. Alistair, would you like me to put that last slide up?
Yeah, look, I'm just kind of conscious that we've crept over time slightly, and I'm sure people have got other things to be doing, and please don't feel obliged to hang around any longer. Yeah.
Okay.
So the next session is going to be on sustainable procurement. We haven't quite locked away a time for that. This is probably going to be end of January, possibly middle of February. I'm conscious that everybody is probably looking forward to a really long, deep, thorough break. For those who have been working over the last kind of 6, 9, 12 months, it's been exhausting. So I'm sure we're all looking forward to some proper downtime. We will obviously let you know when that next session is running. I would encourage you to jump on to CIONET.com.au, join if you haven't already, look at CIONET TV. There's been some really great people, interviews added there recently. Follow us on LinkedIn, provide any feedback, get in touch, ideas on topics you would like to cover, etc. Please let us know. We're here for you. Spread the word as well. The more the merrier. The more people that we get involved, the better these discussions are. Vlad, excellent session, really engaging, really enjoyed it. I certainly learnt a lot. I'm sure some people learnt less, but coming from a low base here. So really enjoyed that. And yeah, look, thanks for giving up your time.
Look, it was my pleasure, and I really appreciated everybody just participating. You know, when we look at creating impact, you just got to get in, and so I'm really happy that everybody did, and you know, everyone participated. I appreciate all your feedback, and feel free to reach out and continue the conversations. You know, people that you've met here, I know that like you know, we're talking about on LinkedIn. You know, just connect, connect and keep the conversations going.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks again, everybody. See you all again soon.
All right, no problems at all. Thank you, guys. Thanks. Oh, hold on.
For the last 15 years.
Didn't realize there was a video there.
Thank you, everyone. Great. Thank you.